Hi everyone. Today we're having our second segment of the day. I hope everyone's having a lovely Sunday today. So today we have two special guests with us, Miss Deborah, who is our special needs teacher, and Miss Sheeba John, who is the head of academics. So today our segment is going to be based off inclusivity. So Miss Debbie, tell us, what does inclusivity mean for Chaman Bhartiya School?
Right. For us at Chaman Bhartiya, what inclusivity means will be to have different learners inside the classroom, to have children with learning disabilities, to have children who are slow learners, and children on the spectrum who are high functioning, and children with maybe some of the attention issues. So we welcome children with different learning styles inside the classroom, and we give them the needed support inside the classroom. So it's not merely about pull-out sessions, but it's about seeing how we can help each child and tailor make our instruction accordingly. So instruction, there will be differentiated instruction. So it's a tiered approach that we will be taking, and so that's okay. Yeah, and also when it comes to not only the inputs but also how we assess them, how we gauge them, the assignments, the worksheets, everything will be differentiated for our children.
Yes, I think that's so important. Ms. Sheeba, would you like to add on to what inclusivity means to CBS?
I think I would totally resonate with what Ms. Debbie has just mentioned. It's about giving every child the equal opportunity of the same quality of education every child would get in a classroom setup. And I think, in fact, I was reading about it just yesterday, and about UNICEF writes about it. There's about 93 million children in the world who have disabilities. Yes. And then 53% of those, they do not get the quality education. Yes. It's only a small percentage of these children actually are embedded, they are included into mainstream education, and they are given this education. What about the rest? Yes. What do you do about them? So I think Chaman Bhartiya, what we are doing is to be able to promote this amazing quality, this amazing idea of including children of all kinds. It doesn't really matter. It's about working together in a collaborative manner, because there is so much to it. Yes. Right? It's about being able to learn from one another. And in fact, research has also proven that when children of different capabilities, they work together, they build resilience, they learn empathy. And I think the list is endless when it comes to being able to learn in an environment, in an inclusive environment.
Also, if I may add on, I think inclusivity is also about belonging, don't you think? Because you want to not be just physically present with a bunch of other kids, but it's also feeling like you belong with a group of people. You want to be able to walk into a class and really belong to something bigger. So I think that's inclusivity for us as well, right?
Absolutely. I think inclusivity, I mean, like, what really will happen inside the classroom is supposed to be like a mini representative of the world outside. And when we are inclusive in the classroom, it fosters a spirit of acceptance and tolerance. Like you said, we belong. And children will realize that friendships are not just, when we are all in uniform and when there are more commonalities, but we can go ahead, cut across barriers and make friends with absolutely anyone inside. And this is our best bet to have a better world, to have an equitable society tomorrow, and better workplaces where workplaces are also inclusive. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for that. I thought that was so powerful. I'd also like to ask, because we're talking about inclusivity here, we want to be able to include children with various learning styles and techniques to be in the classroom with other students. I want to know how this benefits the development of the other students around.
Right, like I was saying, like I feel it really fosters empathy. It fosters, friendships, rising above differences. Understanding that each of us can be different in so many ways, and yet to connect with each other as, just as human beings. And I think and of course, like there can be differences. We cannot always expect it to be very positive and rosy. There will be those differences, but that's when our circle time comes in. That's when the teacher, the facilitator has to, learn to sort of step in and mediate those experiences and make it positive so that we are all growing and evolving over time.
Right. Sheeba, would you like to add on to how the students will also benefit, the other students would also benefit from this inclusivity aspect?
Yeah, I think for me, like I said earlier, it's about resilience, being able to build resilience, develop empathy towards one another. I think it's one of those 21st century skills, having compassion for one another, about belonging, like you said, about working together as a team, as a family, as a community. I think it is so important for children to feel just because somebody looks different or maybe is probably challenged in a particular way, it does not matter how intelligent somebody is. A child with maybe a little bit of a challenge would be as intelligent as any child who's considered normal. So why should there be any disparity is something that is a burning question in my heart. And why are we actually letting it percolate in our society, right? It's about equality. It's about equity, as Ms. Deborah talked about.
Yes, definitely.
And since collaboration is also one of our, four principles that we adhere to,
absolutely,
this is a great place for them to begin.
Yes, definitely. Also, I'd like to ask, since CBS focuses on holistic development, we want to be able to, cater to every child's needs. So I want to have an in-depth understanding as to how the curriculum is formed to cater to these learning difficulties the students might have.
Yeah, I feel our curriculum is very holistic. So we are looking at being able to communicate, being able to emote, understanding one another, kind of learning to live as social beings and not just looking at my life from my point of view. And even for a child with a learning disability or, a child who's a slow learner, the world shouldn't be all about herself or himself. They need to learn to understand how others think. So empathy is not just for them from others, it's also for others from children with issues. So I believe we are very holistic in our approach towards children at Chaman.
I also think sometimes it also teaches us something about a domain that we're not good at, that someone else may be good at. So that collaborative work makes us really build on these domains that are really a lot to learn from.
Yes. In fact, I feel we also need to go that extra mile to identify what the child is good at. And every child for sure is good at something. So we need to right?
Totally.
Go ahead and encourage those strength areas and see where, if that can turn into your passion projects.
Yes.
Actually, I want to ask Ms. Debbie, because you worked extensively in this field, I want to ask if you could give us a bit of an experience of your own, wherein you worked with a particular child or, you worked with students, wherein you've seen that incremental growth from the start to, the later on. If you could tell us something about that.
Sure, why not? So right now I'm working with a child who came to me last year and he was in grade 8. Now he is reading, he was not able to read the Deutsch list words when he came to me, which is the beginning, the most common sight words in pre-KG. But today he is able to read grade 5 and grade 6 texts and learn to summarize them, learn to point out to the main idea, learn to figure out what are the supporting ideas for the main idea. So definitely when there is a good mediated learning experience for the child will flourish, the child will learn to overcome his or her challenges and difficulties in terms of reading, writing, spelling, and go on to also gain more confidence and understand that he or she doesn't have to just be the way they were. We definitely see those
that progression
increments. Also, on the sidelines, I always try to look at the person holistically and see if there are any talents that can be developed, because very often what parents do is they are so bothered that their child may not be able to go through schooling. So they will not have time for other things. They will not be looking at, developing other interests of the child, but only focusing on studies, which is so wrong.
Yes,
so that is also something that I will encourage the parents to.
Yes. You talked about briefly about the different types of learners. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So when we look at learning disabilities, so this is an sort of an umbrella term, if I may say, and we have different LDs under that.
Yes.
We have different kinds of learners under that. Now even if you look at just dyslexia being the main learning disability, I think 70% of the time all children with LD will have a dyslexia.
Okay.
Even in that, there are so many subtypes. Some of them could be, very good visual learners, but some of them may not necessarily be. And while dyslexia earlier was looked at as greatly as a visual issue, today it is understood that it is 100% definitely an auditory issue, but coupled with some, visual sequential processing deficits or whatever it is.
Yes.
And then there is another aspect of working memory. So some children with learning disability may have a good working memory, but not all of them do. And they may specifically need reiterations of the phonics again and again and again, because they will forget sounds, but they may be having a good memory for something else. So our memory systems are also very complex. And they can be children with learning disability may also have attention issues about 20 to 30% of the times. And sometimes, when we notice a child is having an attention issue only when there is also hyperactivity, but it need not be always the case. There are always children, those silent ones that just come, attend the class and go back. But if we are not really looking at every learner as as individuals whom we need to cater to, they may just go by without paying attention. So yeah, there is always attention deficit without impulsivity and hyperactivity also showing up. So every learner in that sense is different. So what I believe in is really looking at understanding that no two learners are the same.
Definitely.
Everybody's learning profile is different, and everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. So we need to, really understand and assess where each child stands. And while we tap into their strengths, we also need to see how we can change their weaknesses into strengths
as well.
Eventually.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
While we're on the topic of different learners, I also want to understand, because we're talking about inclusivity here, we're talking about everyone being in the same learning environment. But we also need to understand that there are specific students that require that extra help, that extra effort from our side to be able to cater to their needs in learning. So I want to understand how CBS constructs their curriculum to be able to cater to these needs in terms of assessment, in terms of teaching techniques. So please tell me something about that.
Yeah, so I will be working closely with the facilitators. So the idea is not to just prepare one kind of teaching and deliver it, but to understand there are learners at varying levels inside the classroom. So why we want to have these learners in the class, because we want to have age appropriate classrooms for our learners. That said, we will have children who are a bit slow, children who need tasks to be broken down, children who need easier worksheets, children who may need extra time for their assessments. So we will be looking at how we can tailor make it for each child to the greatest possible extent. So a teacher will not be preparing at one level, but at multiple levels, so that we really go ahead and support the child and make schooling a meaningful and an interesting experience for each child.
I think that's so nice. Thank you, Ms. Debbie, for that very informative session on the different types of learners and how CBS is going to be able to cater to their needs. So in the little bit of our segment left, I'd like to discuss and debunk some myths that we have about learning disabilities, because it's something that's not widely talked about. So I want to be able to break that down for us in this segment. So the first myth we have is people with learning disabilities will not succeed in school.
Well, yeah, that is very true, and many people think that. Now, that is because of the way our educational system is. We need to take a second look at what learning is really all about. Is it about simply producing what is on the textbook on paper? Or is it about really understanding and applying it in real life, or going ahead and being a little more creative and seeing how else we can, we can have a different approach to a certain problem? So, and many of the children with learning disabilities are very good in some of these aspects. They can be very creative, they can be very spontaneous. So it's about really looking at, what is learning for our children. That said, it's also like, I would say, to be very honest, a child with learning disabilities will have his or her sets of challenges inside the school. It's not going to be all smooth sailing, but at the same time, if they are really struggling, the problem is not with them. It is with us, right? Because we are not understanding, from where we need to start. If we are going to be teaching a child who cannot read, if you're continuing to do grade level work, obviously the child is going to be left out and feel absolutely meaningless. It's a point of, it's about coming to school and going back and getting nothing, receiving nothing, and feeling quite miserable and hopeless inside. So it's about, for us to take a look at whether we are really connecting with our children and whether we are really helping them to be learners, and not just learners, but independent learners.
And I think if I can add there, it is definitely a myth, because I have had children, in my experience, wherein they had the learning disability. Some of them were ADHD, some of them were dyslexic. With that being said, I have had the same children who were amazing with reasoning, with problem solving, with coming up with solutions to a particular problem. So in fact, they exhibited greater intelligence, greater reasoning and analytical skills than many of our regular children.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's an absolute myth. And thank you, Debbie, for shedding light on that.
Thank you so much for that. So the second myth we have is all learning disabilities are outgrown by adulthood. Could you break that down for us, please?
I would partly agree with that, because I won't say they are completely outgrown. A learning disability stays with a person for life, but the way they learn to manage it will be much better with time. Also, if they have been identified early and they have received the right intervention at the right time, then to a large extent they can, overcome that issue. To a large extent, the issue is remediated. So to that extent, yes, they have outgrown it in adulthood. Also, they learn other ways to manage, and there is a lot of assistive technology that's available to us, like our Apple pens. We can scribble on it and it prints for us. So there are, right. So there are these technologies that we use, and I mean, how many of us can do quick mental math, right? So we use, we use our calculators. So I think it's not about really outgrowing it, but it's about learning to manage themselves. And then a lot of adults will also go on to be great in their own fields. And so to that extent, they've also, gotten out of it emotionally to not be bogged down by the learning disability, but to understand that spellings or a difficulty in math does not define who they are.
Definitely. I think that's a very nice thing to, discuss in this session. Also, Ms. Debbie, I think, like you said previously as well, I think the instruction plays a significant role in how they perform over time. So I think the next myth we have here is learning disabilities are all the same. Like you mentioned, we have different types of learners who require different techniques to, be able to learn through whatever it is they are. So, so would you like to talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. So definitely, like I said, learning disabilities is an umbrella term. There are so many other, learning challenges underneath this. And there are non-verbal learning disabilities. There are nowadays even attention issues is considered as a learning disability, because learning disabilities basically are affecting the processing skills. It's not affecting our holistic reasoning or our understanding or looking at the big picture, but it's about how do we get there? We get there by our reading, our writing, spelling things right, communication. When these, when these skills are affected, and when you struggle to read, or when you struggle to write, or when your handwriting is so bad that the other person cannot read what you've written, they cannot go on to express their thoughts, or their creativity won't come out. So when we assess children only by what they've written, a child with learning disability may possibly have, better ideas and be more creative. But what are we assessing? We are assessing only their writing. and writing in that span of time that we give them, like, 1 hour, you should be done with your test. So to that end, that is what learning disabilities is all about. Like, the processing skills, the way they receive information, the way they process it, the way they organize it, and the way they express it is what needs to be worked on. But there are a variety of learning disabilities, and even under one particular learning disability, no two children are the same. Yeah.
I really like, Miss Debbie, that you don't look at learning disabilities as a form of a limitation, but an opportunity to explore their skill set, which I think is a really nice thing that you've been able to give us as a takeaway.
Trisha, if I can add, I'm reminded of a particular student. This was like almost about half a decade ago. This child struggled with the hypertonia, and then he's something very similar to what you just mentioned. He struggled to write, and anything he wrote was beyond legible. What do you do about it? I mean, there are different ways of looking at it. As a teacher, you can get frustrated, you can get upset with that particular child. But again, having teachers like Debbie amidst us, it makes such a huge difference, because we were trained, by SEN teachers back there in my previous organization, of course. And what is your objective? It is to be able to reflect and work on what is the objective at the end of the day. It is for the child to be able to express himself or herself freely. Objective is not about just writing down. So what is the other way of assessing that? We gave him a laptop. We said, go ahead. And the idea is we want the creativity to come out on wherever, which medium doesn't really matter. So the child was thrilled. In the beginning, he did have struggle, he did struggle to type, but eventually he said, I feel so comfortable, Ms. Sheeba. Now I'm able to express myself wholly, without using my fingers, because he did, exhibit. That's what hypertonia is about. The psychomotor skills were not fully developed because of the disability that the child was experiencing. So I think it's about being able to mold our ways to accommodate the children's needs. And I think that's important.
Thank you, Ms. Sheeba. I think that was a nice summary to our entire session that we've had today. Thank you so much for your time.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.